Star Wars 7x7 episode 2953. This one's going to be a bit more personal, and not exactly a Star Wars episode, but a Star Wars 7x7 episode, because it's about the fact that we've lost someone in this world who was a great inspiration to me as I've created this podcast, and I wanted to take this episode to share some thoughts about him. His name was Vin Scully, and you may know him best if you know him as the broadcaster for the Los Angeles Dodgers, who was the longest tenured broadcaster with any single sports team. He worked for 67 seasons from 1950 to 2016, first with the Brooklyn Dodgers and then with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you've heard me talk about Vin on the show before. In fact, the day that he retired, which was October 2nd of 2016, I dedicated that episode of the podcast, which would be episode number 821. My, how time flies. That episode was dedicated to Vin and his inspiration to me, and I wrote a longer essay on the website, which I will link to in the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com if you are interested in checking that out. And I shared some additional personal thoughts on my own Twitter feed. That's Alan Voivod on Twitter. I don't usually share that Twitter account here on the podcast. It's usually more the SW7x7 podcast account. But at my Alan Voivod Twitter account, I shared some personal reminiscences there as well. And if you've been a listener to the podcast for any length of time, then you've actually heard something on a regular basis that is directly inspired by Vin Scully. He used to open his Dodger broadcasts with something along the lines of, "Hi everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be." And a variation on that is how I close the podcast when I say, "And may the force be with you wherever in the world you may be." It's because of him and his delivery. Now, I'm going to crib from a few sources here, including the Obituary and the New York Times and in ESPN and other sources as well. The Dodgers' official statement says he was the voice of the Dodgers and so much more. He was their conscience, their poet laureate, capturing their beauty and chronicling their glory, from Jackie Robinson to Sandy Koufax, Kirk Gibson to Clayton Kershaw. Vin Scully was the heartbeat of the Dodgers and in so many ways the heartbeat of all Los Angeles. And I can certainly empathize with that. I grew up in Los Angeles and spent the first decades of my life there listening to Vin Scully. And it is difficult to actually get through this because he meant so much to me. It's surprising for, somebody that you've never met and to feel that kind of emotional reaction. And he was a very private man. He rarely did interviews. Once the baseball season was over, you barely heard from him at all. And he just said, and there was a quote in one of these sources where he said, "I just want to be remembered as a good man, an honest man, and one who lived up to his own beliefs." And I'll tell you a funny story, or at least it was funny for me. So on a work assignment a few years ago, I was on a conference call and somebody was introduced to me with the last name of Scully. And as I did with pretty much anybody who had the last name Scully for many, many years, I asked if this person was any relation to either Dana or Vin. Dana Scully, of course, being the character from the X-Files, and also Chris Carter, who created the X-Files, named Dana Scully after Vin Scully. Then anyway, this person said, "Actually, Vin Scully is my dad." And it was just astounding and shocking, and I actually got to work with one of Vin Scully's kids for a number of months on a project, and he was wonderful and said wonderful things about his father. And I very awkwardly and excitedly said, "Oh my gosh, I have a picture of your dad on my desk." And I took a picture of my desk and sent it around to everybody who was on the conference call to prove it. And I still have that picture on my desk actually today. The picture of Vin Scully, not the picture that I took of the desk. But anyway, so as you can imagine, my thoughts are very much with Vin's family at this time too. So this from ESPN, kind of summarizing some of his stuff. It says, in addition to being the voice of the Dodgers, Scully called play-by-play for NFL games and PGA Tour events, as well as calling 25 World Series and 12 All-Star games. He was NBC's lead baseball announcer from 1983 to 1989 when they used to do the baseball game of the week. He was behind the microphone for so many incredible moments in baseball history. One of those was the night that Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's home run record, and after letting the noise of the crowd come through the broadcast, he said, "What a marvelous moment for baseball. What a marvelous moment for Atlanta and the state of Georgia. What a marvelous moment for the country and the world. A black man is getting a standing ovation in the Deep South for breaking a record of an all-time baseball idol." And letting the crowd take over while selecting his words very carefully, that was always a signature aspect of his broadcasting. He once said, this is in 2016, when the Dodgers opened their final regular home series against the Rockies, and they had a thing for Scully at home plate, he said, "When you roar, when you cheer, when you are thrilled for a brief moment, I'm 8 years old again. You've allowed me to be young at heart. I owe you everything." And I was thinking very much of him at Star Wars Celebration Anaheim in 2015, when we were all together in the Briggs Celebration stage for the premiere of the Force Awakens trailer. And the moment when the screen goes black and you hear Harrison Ford as Han Solo saying Chewie, and then the screen lighting up and you seeing Han and Chewie on the Falcon and him saying we're home. And of course we weren't supposed to record that. We weren't supposed to do anything with that, but I recorded audio of it, and the noise of the crowd when you hear Harrison Ford say Chewie, and just the roar of the crowd washing over you. And then when they show up on screen, that roar of the crowd is the same roar of the crowd that I know that Vin Scully is talking about when he talks about the roar of the crowd at baseball stadiums or sporting events. So I'd like to share one more pair of quotes with you, this time from Barack Obama and from Vin Scully himself. So after Vin retired, Barack Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And Obama said, "Most play-by-play announcers partner with an analyst in the booth to chat about the action. Vin worked alone and talked just with us. When he heard about this honor, Vin asked with characteristic humility, 'Are you sure? I'm just an old baseball announcer.' And we had to inform him that to Americans of all ages, you are an old friend." And for me, and I'm sure for many, many people, he was that and so much more. So as we say on these episodes where we are celebrating someone's life in passing, we go back to Meister Eckhart and his immortal words: "If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough." So this is my way of saying thank you to Vin wherever he may be now. And if he's someone who had an effect on your life, then I hope you will take a moment wherever you are in your day to say thank you for everything that he's given to you and to the people you love as well. So with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the show. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.